John T. Reed, here with my son Dan. Today, I wanted to talk about the football concussion thing. I think there are a whole lot of people who hate not football, but the people who love football. And they tend to be liberal Democrats and so forth. But they hate the people who love football. Therefore, they're going to use their power, which you would think they could use on a few things like getting more people in the workforce and stuff like that. But no, they're going to use their power and their time to hurt the people who love the sport of football. So on the matter of concussions, I played football, tackle football, until I was 25. My son sitting next to me played tackle football in the Ivy League, and he played one game of semi-pro until he was about 22, 23. As you might be able to discern, we are not head cases. Dan doesn't think he ever got a concussion. I don't think I ever got a concussion.
I certainly never was diagnosed with a concussion. There were only 2 hits in my entire career that I look back on and could say, I suppose it's possible. But I kept playing. The effects of it went away after about 10 seconds. I hear concussions. That stuff lasts a lot longer. But I'm not a medical doctor, and I did not diagnose myself. A doctor didn't look at me, so I can't be sure. But I don't think so. And I certainly never missed any. I didn't even miss a play.
Yeah, well, that's part of
which
the
some
problem.
People would argue is part of the problem and all that. But I've never had a migraine in my life.
Well, I've had an occasional,
and I don't usually have headaches.
Yeah, but and you also graduated from an Ivy League college, Columbia University, with a degree in computer science, and you now work in the computer field, where you're an expert in some marketing software, and to hear all these people ranting and raving in the movie about the concussions and all that, you would think the two of us would be in wheelchairs, babbling and drooling. And there's millions of people who played football, and they tend to be disproportionately successful after football in other activities. So the idea that we're all a bunch of head cases with CTE is a bunch of nonsense. This, as I said, this is motivated by people who hate the people who love football. It's not medical. Now, there's one doctor, and he was the one that made all the noise that got him the movie. But
he's getting more and more shrill. Like I heard him call letting your kids play football child abuse, I think.
Right.
Recently.
Right.
He's getting more and more ridiculous.
Right. And my 3 kids played youth football. I played what we called sandlot back in the 50s. We didn't have all the organized youth football. But we played tackle without helmets and stuff because we couldn't afford the helmets. And it was a different era. And you might, we're crazy to play football without helmets. No, we weren't. We played it a little differently. It was sort of like rugby. We weren't stupid.
I've seen people advocating that it's kind of the hypothesis, what if they weren't wearing helmets? Would it be safer? And it's not a completely off base idea.
I have a little data on that. We, as you know, when you were in high school and I was coaching high school football, we participated in the Diablo Valley Community College Passing League, which was touch football. I also have a son who played flag football, which I coached. And they have an injury in flag football and touch football, which we don't have in tackle football. It's called a skull fracture. It's from 2 people running into each other, both going after the same football. It's in the air.
Is that worse than a concussion?
Yeah, it's more. It's what they call acute. So here's what I say to those who are bitching about concussions in football, and they want to outlaw the sport and all that, or they want to switch, which makes me laugh. They want to switch to just tackle and touch. Tackle and touch are more dangerous. When I was at West Point, and still, intramural sports are mandatory for everybody if you're not in an intercollegiate sport. And you have 3 seasons at West Point: fall, winter, and spring. And everyone who's not on an intercollegiate athletic team has to play a intramural sport each of the 3 seasons. And at least once during your time at West Point, you have to have a what they call a collision sport, like football, because they're training us to be military commanders and killers. And, you got to understand the principle of the offense and all. So when we started our touch football program when I was a cadet, we already had tackle football intramural, but they started touch football, not flag, I don't believe. And I happened to be senior year. They made me a referee for the touch football, so I participated in it. But when West Point decided to add touch football, because we increased the size of the Corps of Cadets from 2,500 to 4,400 when I was there, and they needed more sports. So one of the ones they added was touch football. We went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis to ask them about how to do touch football, because they already had it. And they said, you know what sport? And they have like 40 intramural sports at West Point and Annapolis, and I guess the Air Force Academy. The Navy guy said, you know what sport we have here at Annapolis intramural that causes the most injuries? And the Army guy said, no, what's that? They said touch football. They had tackle football, but they said touch football caused more injuries, intramural sports injuries at Annapolis than tackle football. Plus they had other collision sports like lacrosse and so forth, and boxing. So the most injuries came from touch football in a system where they also had tackle football, boxing, wrestling, and lacrosse. So the idea that we would be better off, and that little children are better off playing touch or flag, is nutso. When I coached flag, I remember 2 guys. There was a ball in the air, and they both went for the ball, and they hit head to head, and that was a very ugly sound that those heads made, and it was a very scary thing. You don't have that in football. The helmet doesn't protect totally from concussions because you have a collision inside the skull where the brain is moving up against the inside of the skull. But we do not have skull fractures in tackle football. They could easily wear helmets in flag and touch, and they should. And I remember De La Salle High School, which is a top football program in America over the long term, at our local passing league, which they participated in. After the 2 guys got skull fractures, they started wearing helmets to the touch football games. Nobody else did, but that can be done. It should be done. But that would kind of hurt the narrative that touch and flag are so nice and nobody ever gets hurt and they're so safe. They like hell they are.
Yeah, it seems like over years people have been talking about concussions and criticizing it, and I think people's major attitude is, well, yeah, we're watching a sport where people purposely run into each other at full speed. Of course there's concussions. And so that it didn't really take the same sort of effect over people watching as this more clinical, medical sounding CTE. And there was a study that came out recently where everybody, blasted the headline out. 110 out of 111 brains of NFL players showed signs of CTE. And the phrasing in various articles about CTE is humorous. Signs of CTE, or just CTE, or severe CTE. Nobody says whether... It's just all grouped together as this serious condition. And, Aaron Hernandez's brain, he was a Patriots tight end, murdered somebody, committed suicide after he got convicted, and they found CTE in his brain, and everybody's using this as a big story that CTE, basically implying that CTE caused them to either commit suicide or murder someone or both.
Yeah, well, you get these strange diseases that were unknown prior to the last 20 or 30 years. They cause men to beat their wives. They cause men to lose their job. They cause men to do drugs, all because they got bumped somewhere along the line. Very strange.
Well, yeah,
You get 8,000 different symptoms. The vast majority of diseases and injuries have one or two symptoms. But the anti-football, anti-Agent Orange, all that, these diseases or these injuries cause 8 million zillion, everything known to man, PMS, athlete's foot, you name it. It's all caused by Agent Orange and bumping your head in a football game.
Well, and that's that study of the 111 brains. It was not a random sample. It was what the doctor called a convenience sample. It was donated brains of people who exhibited degrees of brain disease before dying. So their loved ones noticed that their former NFL football player had brain stuff. They donated his brain. They found something wrong with his brain.
Yay! We proved
what does this mean?
Confirmation bias. Yay.
Obviously, football can cause brain damage, but it doesn't. It's not universal. That's sort of the implications. If you play football, you'll get CTE, or you could get CTE, and CTE is axiomatically bad.
Right, and if your kid plays football at age 8, like when you started, he's going to have CTE at age 9. It's
right, yeah, and it doesn't say the age of these people. It says, they exhibited brain disease symptoms. Were they 87?
What else did
when they died, or they showed these symptoms? Do you get CTE and live a fulfilling life? What is
and what else did they do?
What is it specifically?
Is football a collision the only thing that causes a concussion? I don't think so. I heard they have a lot of concussions in soccer from heading the ball. And then when you have two people trying to head the same ball, they're a head-to-head.
Yeah, just like the touch football.
Yeah, and more so, you're actually trained to use your head to head the ball in soccer.
Yeah, they could be swinging it on purpose at each other.
In football, we constantly tell people you don't use your head for anything in terms of collisions. But in soccer, they do. Plus, I remember seeing I coached you in soccer one season, and I coached your brother Steve in soccer one season. The ball would get near the goalie, and the goalie would go down on the ground to grab it, like recovering a fumble in football. And he's got like 5 kids around kicking the ball that he's trying to grab on the ground, and he's not wearing a helmet. But here's what I say to these people who want to go medical on the football concussions. Okay, you don't like concussions. Well, football. No, we're not talking about football here. We're talking about a medical condition called a concussion. And don't tell me that football is the only thing that causes concussions, because that's BS. Why don't we do a Google search for causes of concussions, ranked? And I think we're going to find some car accidents. I think we're going to find some skateboards. I think we're going to find soccer. I think we're going to find baseball. Baseball, there's the phrase collision sport and contact sport. A lot of people think football is a contact sport. It is not a contact sport. Baseball is a contact sport. Basketball is a contact sport. These are sports where from time to time you have contact with the other guy. A collision sport is where you are deliberately trying to have contact, and it is within the rules to have contact. That would be hockey, lacrosse, football, boxing,
rugby,
wrestling, rugby. These are sports. These are called collision sports. These are sports where the collision is permitted, and it is part of the game, and and he who collides best wins. In many cases, a contact sport like baseball, where you slide into second base, and you're trying to prevent the guy from doing a double play, and you make contact with him, and that's dangerous. It's no less dangerous than making a football tackle. Matter of fact, it's probably more dangerous because the football guys are all padded up. And when I was a kid, the pads, the shoulder pads and helmets that we kids wore around the neighborhood were, they were kids stuff. There is no kids stuff anymore in football. The helmets that an 8-year-old kid wears in youth tackle football is essentially the same as the NFL helmet, because all the helmet manufacturers were driven out of business, except 2 or 3, by lawsuits. So there is no such thing as a kid's toy helmet anymore. A typical 8-year-old kid in a youth football league, he's wearing equipment that is essentially equal to the NFL equipment.
You did an article or a chapter in a book, and you've written about it a couple times, about how many kids quit organized sports. What was the percentage?
73% by age 13.
Right. So what we have is people won't sign their 8-year-old son up for football, even though
tackle football,
because even though there's a 73% chance they're going to quit by 13, and the people that make it that far, get cut on the high school team, or they quit, or they give up after 13.
They figure out that
because
sports
they
is
might
not
get
their thing.
CTE in the NFL.
That's apparent. Yeah, well, they think you get CTE as an 8-year-old, which is anybody's ever coached or even watched an 8-year-old football game knows that's ridiculous. Kids,
well, yeah, it's around 12 or 13 when the hits start to perhaps matter, maybe even 14. Well, when they go through puberty. I mean, kids are just not explosive enough.
Well, you and I play
muscular enough, and they have weight limits, so you can't get hit by a much bigger kid.
Right. You played youth football starting at age 8, and you continued to play football all the way through college. And I think you'll agree with me with the following: youth football players do not get injuries as a general rule. I mean, they may get a boo-boo or a laceration or something like that, but they generally don't get injuries. Now, there's exceptions. I remember, I think, 2 broken collarbones, and you wonder how that could happen with the massive shoulder pads that cover, way down to the front of your chest, but they do.
Yeah, collarbone's one of the more protected bones in the body in a football.
In a football uniform, yeah, the shoulder pads come way down to your nipple, and way over down the back over your shoulder blade. But we had a broken forearm in football once, and probably some ankle sprains or stuff, but that was about it. And one of the things with youth players, they're kind of, I don't want to say they're indestructible, but they're very flexible. And we used to make them stretch. And youth football players don't need to stretch. They're pre-stretched. They're stretched at the factory. And then you and I played freshman football, and then we coached freshman football together. And there's a distinct thing that happens in high school. We coached a freshman, and you played freshman. I played freshman. We coached the JV, or I coached the JV. You never coached the JV. You played JV. And then there's the varsity. I coached the varsity. You played varsity high school. The freshman and sophomore players do not pull muscles. They do not get cramps. The junior and senior players get cramps and they get muscle pulls
constantly. Yeah,
and
you might see 1 or 2 at the freshman sophomore.
I don't remember.
I can't remember one either, but I'm willing to accept for the sake of argument that it might happen occasionally. Well, maybe, but it's unequivocal that at the junior senior level it happens constantly.
Yeah, but maybe if I never saw it happen.
There's a distinct difference.
I coached freshman football at Granada High School and Monte Vista High School. I don't remember ever seeing a muscle pull or a cramp. You go to a varsity game. The guys are laying on their back on the sideline, and the trainer's pushing their leg. He's got their ankle on his shoulder, and all this nonsense. When I myself was in high school, I never had a cramp or a muscle pull until senior year, and we were doing. I was in track, and we were told to do like one more lap and then go in, and I did that lap. And the first walking step I took, I got a Charlie horse. I think it was in my right calf, and it hurt like the hell. And I looked at my right calf, and I put my hand on it, and it was like somebody had put a bunch of stones in there, or rocks, and it was all misshapen and all lumpy. And I learned you move along the direction of the muscle fiber, and you sort of roll it out like with a rolling pin. But that happened to me senior year. That never happened to me before. And all I did, I was running, and then I just took my first walking step. And it was, like if you were watching, you would have thought a sniper had opened fire on me. But the children, K through 10 children are very flexible, very. I don't know. They're in some respects they're easily injured. Growing children have a growth plate at the end of each bone, and you don't want to overuse it. That's why it's not recommended they only play one sport all year round. But other than that, young children are like more strong with regard to injury resistance than high school juniors and older. So the whole idea that if sports are dangerous, the NFL is dangerous to professional players, that it's even more dangerous for youth is simply wrong. It's this, and one of the main things is that in the NFL, everybody's the biggest star their high school ever had, and they hit like a truck. And youth football, they aren't very big, they aren't very fast, they aren't very skilled, and the hits are they're little kid hits, and they don't hurt. Now you start get up into the teenage level, and you see some serious stuff. I saw in a JV game at Monte Vista, where my son Mike was a player, the tailback, first string tailback, Mike was second string, first string tailback, a guy named Gortz or something. Remember we coached him first year?
Yeah.
Monte Vista. He went on to be a walk-on at the University of California, Berkeley. He got hit in a game, I think against Antioch or Pittsburgh. And I could see from the stands, it was something wrong with him. He's like walking around like he just woke up and he had soap in his eyes getting out of the shower or something. So he apparently had a concussion. But that's the only one I ever saw.
We saw another one. Or maybe you did. Maybe I did. It was same high school linebacker named Silva. We had him the previous year. He went up to JV, and he got hit at Antioch, and he walked to the other sideline.
Yeah,
and he was led back. Like he was giggling and talking nonsense. He was concussed. It was humorous to watch it. Obviously, a brain injury. It was bad, but he recovered. He continued playing football, and as far as I know, he's fine. But this overall narrative of the CTE, being this deadly disease, I've met a ton of people who are like, I will never let my son play football.
More so than there used to be.
They let their daughter cheerlead, which at that age is far more dangerous.
They let their son skateboard.
They let their kids ride bikes, which is statistically far more dangerous.
Anytime your kid is wearing a helmet or should be, like riding a bike or on a skateboard, he's at risk for a concussion. The idea that you need to put a helmet on him. So what my main point here is, if you are anti-concussion, then I want you to Google concussions and see what the causes of concussions and see what the causes is. And I want you to stop allowing your child to participate in anything on that list unless there's some way to protect them. And as I said, concussions come from the second collision of the brain inside the skull. So the helmet can't do it. So I want you to take your kid out of every sport that has concussion risk. And that includes soccer, skateboarding,
riding their bike to school,
riding a bike, riding in a car actually is probably fairly high on the list. But don't tell me you're against football because of concussions. You tell me you're against concussions, and then you withdraw your child from every sport or activity that has a concussion risk. Every one of them, not just football. Because this removing your kid from football because of concussions is politics. It's not medicine.
Yeah, Wall Street Journal published an article that you brought where it showed 2007 all the growth. It was in 35 states. High school football was growing. That was in 2007. Since then, 38 states have shown a drop in football participation at the high school level. It's only growing in 12 and growing strongly in like 2 or 3.
And this is entirely caused by this concussion crap, which is politics. It's left-wing politics.
Well, and the map is almost looks like the electoral map. It's not an exact match, but
the red states,
the SEC.
States?
Basically, the SEC states are where
still
growing, and everywhere else, for the most part,
and
Utah, it's growing. And
Utah, New Mexico, and then the southeastern conference states, and even then, South Carolina, North Carolina, are dropping.
That's surprising, actually.
But let me. I have a book called Succeeding, which is the one I sell the most copies of now. I have 35 books. In Succeeding, I have a chapter called "Make Yourself Scarce." And the idea behind the chapter is that you can do what better competitively if you go where what you have is not common in a particular area of life. and as a consequence, you will have less competition for winning. So the make yourself scarce principle, when you apply it to this deal where high school football is becoming less popular. First off, high school football is not disappearing off the face of the earth. That article in the Wall Street Journal, which was in the September 8th Wall Street Journal, 2017, the article said that, for example, that some schools that were rivals and the big game at the end of every season was against each other, they had to merge because they didn't have enough kids in each school that were now going out for football. But they merged. They didn't go out of business completely. So now they have like a joint team. And a number of them were Catholic private schools. But so if the number of kids going out for football goes down, and your kid still goes out, he's better off because he's now participating in a sport that's less popular.
For the people that continue to play, it's going to
you're gonna be able to get farther with less talent. So it's a good deal. And the sport is the most popular sport in America as far as TV watching is concerned, and that's where the money is. I think more people actually go to horse races, but that's not. You'd rather own the NFL than horse racing.
Well, attendance-wise, I think NASCAR is
okay,
winning
but football is the TV sport, and the most valuable TV programming in America is the NFL.
Yeah.
And college football might be second. But anyway, and kids can you can get in. My son got accepted by Columbia, Dartmouth, and Yale for football, and combined with his academics.
I got accepted to school, but through the football
because
process,
of football. Yeah. Had you only been a student, well, of course, if you hadn't played football, you would have had better grades because it's time consuming. But you were able to get into Columbia, Dartmouth, and Yale. You were offered an official visit by Harvard. But then they changed their mind. They decided they liked another guy better, I guess. And then you played against those people for 4 years. Mm-hmm. But anyway, football is a great sport for getting into college. And if the popularity of the number of participants in high school football goes down, that makes football an even better sport for your son to play for getting into college. And you have scholarships in the Division 1A and what they call FBS, Football Bowl Series, which is major college football. And you also have partial scholarships, I think, in a lot of FCS schools, which used to be called Division 1AA or Division 2, where they can't give full scholarships to everybody on the team, but they can give like a half a scholarship to everybody, and maybe a couple of guys are getting a full, and some other guys are walk-ons. And then you have leagues like the Division III, which is the small colleges, Amherst and Williams and Pomona and so forth, MIT, Johns Hopkins, and then you have the Ivy League, which is a high academic that used to be Division 1AA. They don't give academic scholarships at the Ivy League, but they do athletic scholarships. They don't give athletic scholarships in the Ivy League, but they do give scholarships to athletes in the Ivy League for need. You got a lot of...
And I discovered my senior year, there was some ceremony, a bunch of people won grants for various things. It was 80% athletes, which was an epiphany for me.
Oh, I didn't know that.
People got academic grants. And it was, I could, the number, I don't have the exact number, but I remember looking through the list of all the students who got grants. They were all athletes, with rare exception. And I didn't research it at the time. I was too young to care, but I did notice that there was quite a bit of my teammates on that list.
It's an epiphany for me. I never heard that before. And then you were one of the top two guys in your team, your football team, your class, academically. Because you were called high band, and that's a technical, it's well known who's what on the team academically.
The players don't necessarily know.
Well, you and I knew because I studied the whole thing. But anyway, you were one of two guys on your team in your year who was high band. So if you were that much smarter than all the other guys on your team, how the hell are they getting grants? I made a comment in an article I wrote about your experience with Ivy League football, that the smartest football players in America as a group are the Ivy League football players. but that the dumbest group of people on the campuses of the Ivy League schools are the football players.
Yeah, it's all relative, but that's true.
Yeah,
there aren't any students that get in on their own that are anywhere near as dumb as the dumbest football players. We had some doozies.
Well, but in your case, I remember one girl you were dating. Her friends told her she could do much better than a football player, and your SAT scores were above average for Columbia. But she assumed that all the football players were the.
There were the first couple months when football players discussed it. We felt like we got and then somebody asked somebody, and there was this feeling that a lot of the students, they had friends that didn't get in, and they knew we got in with help from the administration, so they were kind of pissed at us. But that subsided over time. They realized we worked a lot harder than they did, not at academics, but in general, because we had to go to football 20, 30 hours or whatever.
Well, year-round.
So they had a certain level of respect, and they noticed most of us weren't morons.
Well, and it takes...
and then as far as that girlfriend, yeah, she found out I had a higher SAT score than her, and that whole thing ended.
And she went to medical school.
Yeah.
You had a higher SAT score.
She got better grades than I did.
Well, you're playing football, for God's sake. She did nothing. Anyway, the Ivy League guys who graduate, football players, they're not all in nursing homes at age 23 because of CTE. They generally, matter of fact, they're head of Goldman Sachs is what they are.
Yeah.
VPs, Secretary of the Treasury.
Yeah.
Well, Hank Paulson, who was...
yeah, okay, fair.
But he was a Dartmouth
I meant my
football.
teammates. My teammates aren't running Goldman Sachs yet.
Well, they work for Goldman Sachs.
They work for Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. And
they got
BlackRock
director and VP titles and stuff. They seem to be doing fine.
Well, they're only 36. Like, give them time,
Yeah, well, yeah, no, and they'll die at 84, and somebody will find CT in their brain, and...
Well, in your school, your college...
Someone will draw a conclusion about this that makes no sense.
Your college, Columbia University, decided, they're very snooty, high academic. Harvard, Yale, and Princeton are the three famous colleges in the Ivy League academically. But Columbia is no slouch. And it used to be Columbia had a higher reputation for whatever reason. So Columbia is no slouch, and the football players there are indeed going to Goldman Sachs and places like that, and they're doing just fine in terms of their mental condition.
Yeah, to be devil's advocate, I think people will probably acknowledge that you don't come out of football. Let's say you're an NFL player, you come out, you're done at 28. People aren't necessarily claiming that they are brain damaged at that point, but it will have long-term effects. And
in other words, it'll have short-term effects because the longer it waits to manifest itself, the less time it will be part of your life.
Right. Well, it's the nature of the news. They talk about the notable cases where somebody either had CT or they ended their life early or stuff like that. The Junior Seau stuff. They don't talk about the thousands of NFL players that live long, healthy lives,
right?
With no sense of brain trauma. I mean, there's going to be brain trauma. I mean, that's part of the problem is people sort of act like this is some new thing. Like we didn't know football players hurt their heads. They're running into each other at full speed. There's going to be some side effects. They
probably also do other things in their life other than play football, which also have concussion risk. They're kind of active guys. They stopped doing football. They're skydiving and stuff. Which you did and I did. There's all kinds of other things in their lives, more so than the average person's life. But the main thing is the idea that football players get concussions has been known for 100 years. But it was just recently seized upon by the political left as a way to hurt people who like football. And this stuff about long-term damage, that is a dodge that is used in whenever the left takes hold of something, and they're going to push it like Agent Orange or
global warming,
or global warming, or exposure to
government programs in general. We gotta wait. We gotta wait longer to
non-organic food and all this. There are some things where if you're exposed to it for a lengthy period of time, like smoking, that you will suffer. But smoking is not something where you smoke a cigarette when you're 22, and then you never smoke another one, and then you get lung cancer 30, 40 years later because you smoked one cigarette. And that's what they're claiming with the Agent Orange and the concussions and all this, you get exposure to it for a brief period of time in your youth, and then 40 years later when you get some disease, well, that was caused by this brief exposure. That's not the way it works. The long-term things develop from being exposed to it day in and day out over the long term, like smoking.
You got all these NFL teams kneeling, standing, kneeling and standing.
Linking arms.
During the
during the national anthem.
Not coming out during the national anthem, apologizing. One guy comes out, he apologizes for coming out. Roethlisberger stays in, apologizes for not coming out.
He's one of my fellow West Pointers.
The whole thing is...
Alejandro Villanueva.
Is such a... I mean, the story in general is a joke. What's driven me crazy about it is all the bullshit. Explanations and excuses and stuff like this.
Well,
people trying to say, oh, this has nothing to do with the country or the flag. It has to do with police brutality. Well, then why wasn't it done during warm-ups? It was done during the anthem. Yeah. Kaepernick, when it first started, he said... I didn't want to stand for that. The anthem is what inspired him. It was a spur of the moment thing.
And what was the reasons he stated at the first time he did it?
He's talking about how people of color are oppressed in America and they're not treated right by police and police brutality and blah 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 blah. All this stuff that statistically is very suspect. Talking about people, unarmed black men getting killed in the streets. Constantly. There's this epidemic.
The Boston Strangler was unarmed.
Well, yes. When
Michael Moore was grabbing for the gun.
Michael Brown.
Michael Moore. I don't think Michael Moore fights with his fists. But no. Michael Brown, when he was grabbing for the officer's gun, when the officer was still in his car, Michael Moore was at that time unarmed. I think he might have had Michael Brown was unarmed. He might have had hold of the gun momentarily a couple of times in the grappling for it, but he was unarmed when he didn't grab it. Trayvon Martin was unarmed, except when he was grabbing at the gun and had hold of it a couple of times during the struggle. So this unarmed stuff.
It's all beside the point. Let's accept it.
Yeah.
We're talking about a dozen per year, maybe less.
320
where
million
there's
people.
An unarmed person, but that's not the end of it. You have to look at each case and see what were the conditions. Sure. In the case of Michael Brown, he attacked a cop, tried to take his gun
repeatedly,
charged at him. The cop shot at him. He kept charging. It is as justified as it gets. There are numerous eyewitnesses who are independent, who are not, they were black,
and they testified on behalf of the white cop in a grand jury, which is secret. Thank God for the white cop that they didn't have to testify in public, because then I'm not sure they would have said anything other than
The only people going on the news and talking to reporters were the ones spouting half truths and nonsense.
Hands up, don't shoot.
His best friend just basically told this ridiculous lie about what happened.
That's where the hands up, don't shoot came from. His best friend.
All the other witnesses who were sort of supporting the whole narrative, they were getting the facts wrong, verifiable facts.
Right.
They're just liars, and the whole thing is based on a big lie. But
Well, what about back to Kaepernick? What you told me that he took some course or courses plural at the University of California at Berkeley, because he was San Francisco 49er quarterback, and we live in the San Francisco area. The University of California at Berkeley is in Berkeley, which is at the east end of the San Francisco Bay Bridge, and the 49ers play on the west, south of the west end.
I read an article. It was an interview with Sean King, who's a somewhat famous Black Lives Matter activist, who people have heard of him if you've heard of the story of the Black Lives Matter activist who's raising all this money, but they're not sure where it's ending up. And they also question whether he was black. He claims he is.
I think it's aiding the black lives of one or more blacks.
Somebody went back and looked at it, and he's white. His birth certificate says he's white. And when that all came out, he went silent and wouldn't say anything. And then after a little while, he started coming out very vehemently. I think he figured out that he could deny it and people would believe it. But his first reaction was, "Uh-oh."
Well, he should get a DNA test from AncestryDNA.com.
Well, he could prove it right now. Yeah, he won't. He never will.
It's just like a paternity test.
He could end. It's
kind of a reverse paternity test.
He could end the whole debate right now, and that will never happen.
He could go 23andMe.
I kind of wish someone would get a hold of his DNA and do it.
Yeah, well, it's easy. Yeah, I see that in the cop movies all the time. Give him a can of Coke.
Oh, well, yeah, you could do that, I suppose. I don't know if that's enough for the 23andMe people to extract it. Well, anyways, Sean King, like I said, well-known activist, insufferable. I mean, every cliche of white privilege comes out of the guy's Twitter feed.
But he's white.
His nickname with this whole controversy is Talcum X. One of the best nicknames I've ever heard. But he did an interview and he said, I became friends with Kaepernick while he was recovering from injuries. It turns out he was auditing classes at Berkeley. That was the phrase he used. I assume that means attending. I don't know. But he was attending...
You're an Ivy League college graduate.
African studies and African diaspora studies, which is just a fancy word for, black people being pulled out of Africa in the slave trade.
Black people who no longer live in
sold
Africa.
by other black people, for those keeping track.
Yeah, but diaspora means people who are no longer in the country of their
But
ancestors.
he said, King said that Kaepernick started going to these classes, learning about the systemic racism of the police and this, that, and the other thing. And so he'd always had a concern for it, but he didn't really understand it. And now he was becoming more aware of it.
He's radicalized.
He's becoming woke, as they say in the social media sphere. That's a fancy word that my dad won't know, but he's basically being radicalized at Berkeley by African American studies professors who are, they're a bunch of Marxists and communists, and
liberation theology.
Kaepernick did an interview in Miami wearing a Fidel Castro shirt. That was not, you could tell me it was by accident or it was random. He's in Miami. Biggest population of Castro haters on the planet. But this was all, he thinks America is bad or evil because of police brutality and treatment of blacks in general.
And he stayed kneeling. He kneeled during the national anthem.
Yeah.
To say that which the national anthem
started
represents.
Started by sitting, I believe. But
yeah,
whatever.
That which the national anthem represents sucks.
That's
what he said. Now it's like, oh no, it's just team unity.
Yeah, it's America sucks because of police brutality
against blacks.
We can,
against blacks.
Yeah, and you can argue about police brutality, the severity of it, and there are certainly it's not like there are no cases of unjustified killings and stuff like that. But
there may be an amazing lack of it, given all things considered. And what a cop's job does at 2:00 in the morning in a dark street in an urban area.
The complete lack of perspective or statistical scale, where we're spending all of our time talking about half a dozen people.
Now you're talking about the white supremacists.
Were killed under questionable circumstances.
Yeah.
Not slam dunk, unjustified killings.
Yeah.
Trayvon.
A couple of them got the white guy that pulled the trigger got in big trouble. Guy shot the guy in the back.
Some of these cases they're being prosecuted.
Yeah,
and being sent to jail.
Yeah.
Others they're not, and the reason is because the overwhelming majority of them are justified. You may not like what happened, you may think it could have been avoided, but a justified shooting is a justified shooting.
Well, you have a 3-week trial, and the jurors and the judge are sitting there listening to all the testimony, and then when the verdict comes out, a bunch of people who paid next to no attention to the trial, certainly weren't in a courtroom, didn't hear all the evidence, they know better than the judge and the jury who's guilty. Bull.
Yeah, the national anthem, they say, please stand up and remove your caps.
Yeah.
Look at the flag.
Yeah.
We're going to celebrate the country for 2 minutes. or depending on how many syllables the singer uses.
Yeah, how many syllables in the word free.
But
whether they get a nightclub singer or a military band, it may take longer with a nightclub singer saying "the land of the free."
Yeah, everybody kind of shut up. Let's remember the country. You might find that cheesy or whatever. You might not like it, but that's what it's for. And the people protesting it know that. And they want, like you said earlier,
they're trying to get the biggest rise.
They want to piss off the people.
They want to hurt. They want to hurt the people who love the anthem as much as possible. They don't do the pregame warm-ups because then we wouldn't have all this controversy about disrespecting the flag and the anthem. They pick the anthem to get the biggest rise. Just like teenagers who don't know how to spell Nazi will put a swastika on a synagogue in order to get a big rise out of the local media. But they won't put a crescent, a Muslim crescent, on a Presbyterian church because it doesn't get the same amount of publicity. The reason that Colin Kaepernick kneeled for the national anthem was to get the biggest possible amount of pissed offedness.
Well, I might even argue that Kaepernick did it for his own reason. He did it for 2 or 3 games before anyone noticed. So I think it was 2 preseason games and then a regular season game, and a reporter asked him about it, and that was the big famous interview. So on the other side of it, to be fair, I don't know if Kaepernick was doing it as a publicity stunt. I guarantee the people doing it now are.
Yeah. Well, there's also you had a growing number of other black NFL players taking a knee to show solidarity with Kaepernick. Well, now you have to say, oh, wait a minute, guys. It's a football league. You have some guys that get interviewed after a game and they had a good game. And they say, oh, what do you think? What was the key to success? Oh, it was the Lord. They start talking about Christianity and all that. People are not interested. They don't turn a football game on to hear that stuff, and they don't turn a football game on to watch one race of players demonstrating against mistreatment by another race. That's not the people keep talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment is not a football game. You're on duty. You're at your workplace, and you promised a bunch of people who came into the stands and who turned on the TV they were going to see a football game. And we have the tradition of the national anthem before the game, but the tradition includes standing up, take your hat off, put your hand over your heart. I'm a veteran, and we are now authorized by law to salute. Now, I haven't done it, even though we're in civilian clothes and we're not in the military anymore. We're authorized, if we are veterans, to salute. And you mentioned something about the solemnity of the anthem. When I was a cadet at West Point, I had to march in a whole hell of a lot of parades. And we screwed around in a parade. If you could have, the spectators are like 60 yards away. But we're out in a parade that, when I was a freshman, they're saying, "Hey, Reed, give us a joke." So I got to tell a joke, and if it's, it better be good, and or they want to know what's for supper tonight, and people are joking and kidding around. I got a date. She told me she'd be in a red dress on the east end of the stands. So everybody's looking out of their peripheral vision to check her out. So this is what's going on in a parade at West Point. But in all parades, when the cadets all march out on the field and stop, the band then plays the national anthem, and we shut up for the national anthem. Nobody could hear us except us. We're 60, 70 yards away from the spectators. But when they started playing the national anthem, the upperclassmen, the seniors would make sure that the juniors and sophomores and the freshmen would never talk, but the juniors and sophomores would shut up because this is the national anthem. It's special. So that was in the 60s. So the national anthem, half the people in the stands get goosebumps when the national anthem plays because of all it represents, and because they were in the military maybe, or because the military saved their ass somewhere. They were in some other country and they needed help, and when they saw the U.S. military flag on some APC that was coming toward them, they were elated. Hell, I think the Russians got into trouble in some place outside of Russia, and they saw an APC with an American flag on it. They would be elated because they know the Americans are the good guys, so it gives people goosebumps, and it should. It's just a very special thing, and the players know it. They probably didn't know it as well as they needed to, but they do now. And then the most
I don't
recent.
believe they don't know it. They've been playing football their whole lives. Every game they've been in,
They probably played baseball and other sports.
I don't, save the guy that played 2 years in college and he's from another country, but he's
in Little League they don't play the national anthem, but in youth football they do, and it's recorded. But when you were 8 years old, a lot of people don't know youth football, aren't familiar with it. Youth baseball is played in little winky-dink baseball fields all over the place. Most of them don't even have an outfield fence. Youth football is played in high school stadiums, and the referees are high school referees who ref the game Friday night, and then on Saturday all day they ref youth football games. They're wearing a uniform.
Certainly in California.
There's cheerleaders. The snack bar is open. We did not have a band. But you had to pay to go to a youth football game. You do not have to pay to go to a Little League game. I don't think you have to pay to go to CYO basketball. But youth football is a big deal with cheerleaders, a whole lot of people in the stands. They're mainly relatives, but they play 4 different games during the day. So you've got all 4 levels of parents and friends and stuff. It's a big deal. And part of it, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old and you're standing there with your tackle football uniform on, is everybody stops. The players take their helmets off. They play the national anthem, a recording of it, even in youth football. There's no other youth sport, I don't believe, that does that. So the anthem being part of the youth football, and hell, half the halftime shows nowadays, they get some monster U.S. flag out there. So and they frequently have they honor soldiers, and they have a color guard of soldiers in almost every game. So it's a big deal. Now, the last weekend's big explosion where every single NFL team, 32 teams, every single one was doing a Kaepernick solidarity thing. And some people may wonder, who's Kaepernick? Yeah, well, he was once upon a time, he was an NFL football player. And he radicalized himself out of being an NFL football player. Because he's not good enough to be first string. And as one NFL lineman said when he was asked why Kaepernick doesn't have a job, he says because no coach is going to put up with all this kind of distraction from a second-string quarterback. So he became a second-string quarterback who had to run his mouth, so now he's a former quarterback. But the big explosion last week was caused by Donald Trump saying that these guys should be fired who do that. And so all the NFL players, they got to get in Trump's face and show him who's boss. Well, guess what? Thursday Night Football, they all stood up. And apparently they were told by the owners, you will stand. And if you don't stand, you'll be fired. And you can show solidarity with Kaepernick by being equally unemployed. I think the average salary in the NFL is $2.4 million a year. So they stood. If you make them behave, they'll behave. They were saying before, well, we can't do anything about this. It's freedom of speech. BS. Be freedom of speech for a doorman at the Fairmont Hotel to wear a Never Trump button, but it ain't happening.
Yeah, the free speech, First Amendment, that has to do with whether the government can lock you up for. It has nothing to do with what you can say at work.
Right.
You can be fired for just about saying anything at work.
Well, it's the fans. 77% of the players are black, and 88% of the fans are not black. And 88% of the fans, or maybe more, love the flag, love the anthem, and think it merits respect. So the players do not work for the owners. They work ultimately for the fans, sitting home watching TV and in the stands. And the fans were not happy. And even Thursday, when they all stood, but they linked arms to show solidarity. They still this linking arms thing, even that was showing solidarity with Kaepernick's original complaints about white cops shooting black cops.
Yeah, it's done during the anthem because it's about the flag and the country. That's what Kaepernick was protesting, because black bodies are in the streets and people aren't going to jail for it. That was the gist of what he said in the original interview. It was like 16 minutes, so it's a long interview, and he said a lot. But he's talking about black bodies in the streets and people not getting arrested for it. That is an absurd slander to pretend that is what the United States is about, because we're talking about a dozen or half a dozen people that fit this description. Some people are expanding it now. They're talking, well, no, it's about all police brutality, not just killing black people. It's about jerking back black people around. Like, no, that wasn't what it was about. You can claim that's what it is now, but don't say you're standing in solidarity with Cap over that, because that's not why he did it.
Well, and the one of the things that's been said, and I agree, and it's obvious, is that, okay, let's say that's a legitimate gripe. What are you going to do about it? Well, you could quit football and go become a community organizer somewhere to try to put a stop to it. You could quit football and run for office and try to vote for better laws to help protect people. You can, in the off season, you stay in football, but in the off season, you go around making speeches to all sorts of community groups about this issue. But you don't, when you're on duty at work and you're getting paid $2.4 million, and you're not allowed. They have guys at every football game in the NFL keeping an eye on every player's socks. And if your socks droop, because a lot of players, they want to distinguish themselves from their teammates by changing their uniform so that they stand out. And sometimes they used to let their socks fall down. They would cut the elastic in them, and they would fall down and say, "Oh, gee, it wasn't my fault." Well, they have actually a guy, normally a former player, whose job, he's the sock Nazi. He's won at every game, and he writes down the jersey number and the team name of anybody whose socks droop. So, and they, there was a quarterback for the Bears named Jim McMahon, and he once wore a white sweatband on his head. Couldn't see it except when his helmet was off on the sideline. It had an Adidas symbol on it, and he was fined $5,000 for wearing that in one game, because the league had a exclusive contract with Nike or somebody, and Adidas, and you had the little Nike emblem on the jerseys, and Adidas complained, and it was a violation of the contract. So McMahon was told, he was fined $5,000 and told he couldn't do that again. And the next week he had a same headband, only it didn't have an Adidas symbol, and he wrote Rozelle on it, the name of the commissioner of NFL who had fined him, which Rozelle thought was funny. But this is the kind of discipline they have in the NFL when they want to have it.
Oh, the uniform stuff, they're extremely
They're control
about.
Freaks, yeah.
Well, after the Dallas shooting, Cowboys wanted to put like a sticker.
Right, exactly.
And the NFL said no.
And a sticker in support of violence against police being a bad thing.
It was to support police.
Yeah.
Who had been shot by a guy. The police didn't do anything wrong. The guy just shot him because they were police. And so Cowboys wanted to put a sticker, and the NFL said no. And it has nothing to do with the NFL opposing celebrating the police. They're just not going to do it with the uniform. They have decided the uniform is not to be touched. They decide all uniform decisions.
They don't, they occasionally have an entertainer at halftime in the Super Bowl who gets a little bit off the track in terms of inappropriate stuff, and they freak out about that. They're the biggest bunch of wimps I have ever known in my life, the NFL owners. We got every year now we have people wearing pink for breast cancer awareness. Well, excuse me, but
that should start on Sunday, I believe.
Yeah, excuse me, but is the NFL really the place to go with breast cancer awareness? How about a little prostate cancer awareness? Maybe how about we have an awareness every month or every week? We can be aware of autism, and we can be aware of violent gun deaths in the inner cities. We can have the players, look like they never appear in the same uniform twice, because every week we gotta pretend like the NFL is about reform of political stuff. It's supposed to be, as a number of people pointed out lately, a diversion. You watch a football game just for the same reason you go on vacation to Hawaii, to get away from your troubles and veg out. And it's a form of entertainment, and it's a sport, and entertainment and sports has nothing to do with social issues. And the players their freedom of speech has to do with the government preventing them from speaking, which is not a factor here, and their ability to speak, and it's somewhat limited, I think, but they can speak when they're not, in the off season, and they can speak when they're not at practice or in a game or something.
Yeah, the game is a show. Think of it like a play. Picture someone in the middle of a TV show, just going off their lines.
Well, how about in the middle of an Emmy Awards broadcast or an Academy Awards broadcast?
Those aren't necessarily scripted, yeah.
No, they're not scripted. They're live, is why they get away with it. If it was recorded, like most TV programs, they would cut it out, and so they don't even try to do it.
The picture in the middle of a Broadway play, someone just stops the whole thing. Lion King, and then they start talking about police brutality.
I just went to a play the other night.
Which one?
Ain't Too Proud, the story of the Temptations. It's a musical. And at the end of it, they did a little speech like that. Now, they were talking about helping the hurricane victims. Hamilton
is different.
Hamilton in Manhattan, they did. It wasn't in the middle, but it was the end. They made a political speech.
Pence was there.
Not when I was there. I went
the
to
Hamilton one.
I went to Hamilton in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Me and your mom.
They did it again at that?
They did some kind of political crap at the end of the thing. You and your mom.
Well, the one that went viral.
Me and your mom and Steve were there.
The one that went viral was Pence was there.
Yeah.
And the actor that addressed him, I actually went to college with him.
He's a Columbia guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway.
All my classmates loved it.
Let me get to a bottom line here. What the NFL should have done all along is say, hey, Kaepernick, you're not allowed to do anything other than stand during the national anthem. We won't require you to put your hand over your heart or your helmet over your heart the way we always did it when I played. You can do you put your hand in your pocket, but you got to stand silently. You're not going to in any way disrespect the flag or the anthem or any of that. Your job is to play football. That's what you're going to do. And then when other guys started being in solidarity with them, they needed to be told, hey, NFL rule, during the national anthem, you stand and you do nothing. You just behave yourself. Essentially, aside from saying fire the son of a bitch, Trump said what I just said, that they should have to stand for the national anthem and show respect. What has happened now?
Because that's what the viewers want.
Right. Well, and also
most of the viewers.
It's a total irrelevant distraction. It's a football game,
right?
And we're putting on a show for the fans and a competition. So what has happened here is that Trump said, fire the son of a bitch, which has not been done, although in Kaepernick's case, one could argue maybe it has. And he said the players should be ordered to stand for the national anthem. Guess what? They apparently have been.
Wait, we think.
Well, Thursday night.
Yeah, one game.
We'll see on Sunday. 2 teams. Yeah, we'll see. I'll predict, and I'm not a big predictor, but I'll predict that behind closed doors, the black players have been told 88% of the fans are not black. Maybe 90+% love the flag, love the anthem, love their country. If you don't, you're welcome to emigrate. You're welcome to quit the NFL. But as long as you're in the NFL, you will stand and show respect during the anthem. Period. We will not tolerate any of this, and the next guy who pulls this crap is going to be fired. He's going to join Kaepernick as an unemployed former NFL player. That's what needed to happen. I think behind closed doors, something along those lines has happened. I think the black players themselves have maybe realized, a lot of people talking about not going to the game, not watching on TV, and that could affect our salary,
right,
our next contract negotiation. So I think they figured out what they should have known beforehand.
We'll see.
This is not something that should be allowed. It's not something anybody should do. And I think one way or another, what I just said and what Trump said has happened. Trump said they should not be allowed to do this, and I think what's going to happen this weekend is they're not going to do it. And there may be some nuances as to why, but it's basically what Trump and I said. They should not be allowed to do this, and probably they've been told, you're hurting the league, you're hurting your own future contract negotiations.
Well, aside from the NFL's decision or what they do or don't do, I just get hung up on this whole them claiming it's about A when it's about B. They're saying, we just want to spread awareness about police brutality towards people
do it
of
after
color.
The game.
Well, no, but I'm saying that's not what it is. It's one step away from a middle finger toward the flag.
Yeah,
that's what.
The fans
that like the anthem and are
it's almost everybody
spout about patriotism and stuff like that. They want to piss off those people.
Right.
I've seen jokes of
let's talk about some other taking a knee. Tim Tebow.
Let me finish the thought real quick.
Okay.
They're their supposed argument is that they're trying to get out, awareness. That I hate that word. We're going to awareness about this. Like nobody knew about it.
Universal justification for everything.
If that was what it was, they would bring out the real statistics, which is like what I said. If you're an unarmed black man in America, you're more likely to get hit by lightning. It's about the same. I mean, it's absurd, the entire discussion. When you look at the actual statistics and you factor in crime rate and all this stuff, in some cases, white people are being targeted less. I think you mentioned that earlier. But it's about even. It all evens out when you factor in the relevant things.
Well, even if blacks are like disproportionately stopped for traffic stops, and they did a study of this. The New Jersey State Troopers got tired of being accused, and they hired some really high-tone, credible company. And I think what they found was at night, the blacks were getting stopped more than the whites. But in daytime, the whites were more likely to get stopped for a given speed, traveling at a given speed above the limit than the blacks. Because in the daytime, the cops could see who was black and who was white, and they were bending over backwards to not stop the blacks. So the blacks,
where was
this?
This
New Jersey, New Jersey.
One state.
Yeah, I think they found that if a white person was doing like 8 miles over the limit, they would get a ticket. But if you were black in the daytime, when they could tell, and you're going 15 miles over the limit, then you would get a ticket.
Yeah,
the blacks had to speed more in the daytime to get a ticket than the whites. But at night, when they couldn't tell you were black until you got out of your car, or they went up to your car, the blacks were getting a disproportionate number of tickets. But they weren't getting a disproportionate number of tickets in relation to the speed they were traveling. Right. They were getting, or having a tail light out or something.
Yeah.
They're getting a disproportionate number of tickets because they're committing a disproportionate number of violations.
Yeah, it might be the same study or same series of studies. It was 23% of people that were pulled over for speeding were black. Well, they also found that 25% of the people speeding were black.
Right, yeah. If you don't pull them over, you just video the cars going by. And you know what this is? Affirmative action. Like a lot of blacks have said that they slacked off academically. When I was a kid, the blacks were told you have to work twice as hard as a white man to get the same thing. So they studied hard. Thomas Sowell and all those guys, that generation. Now, blacks are admitting that they slack off because all you have to do is get decent grades as a black to get into a high academic, prestigious school. Because of affirmative action. So by the same token,
less common nowadays than it was like in the 80s.
Okay,
it was outlawed
in California,
outlawed at Berkeley, right?
Yeah, they outlawed in California.
California,
but and when they did, there was one black guy get admitted to the law school class, and when he heard he was the only black guy, he went to Harvard.
So weird that he decided to change. It's like,
hey, he didn't want to be the only black guy.
Okay,
so then there were none.
That's not racist at all.
But. Anyway, the talk about taking a knee pre Kaepernick. There's a guy named Tim Tebow. Whenever he scored a touchdown, he used to take a knee and look up at the sky and do a little Christian stuff. And after every game, I think some of the players gather out on the field, the middle of the field, and they'll take a knee in a circle.
Yeah, that's done at all levels.
In a circle. Okay, this is okay. This is showing, maybe a raising awareness. They're setting an example. Nobody's complained about it. No, I don't think anybody complained about Tim Tebow taking a knee.
People that can't stand to see anyone act religious complained a little bit. I've seen a couple articles that said, the people that are supporting Kaepernick were against Tebow, stuff like that. It's the same, spitball throwing crap.
Now, I wrote a book called Football Clock Management, now in its 5th edition. It has a chapter on taking a knee, which is at the end of a game.
It's slightly different.
Yeah, well, it's a rule thing where if your knee goes to the ground, the play stops.
I think the actual physicality of what's being done in the protest is not the point. It's that they're protesting during the anthem.
Yeah,
it's
the fact that when they're doing it and why they're doing it is the problem. But I think it's over, as it should be. Because I think the NFL owners and a whole lot of people in America, they allow blacks to misbehave more. Like the New Jersey State Troopers not giving them a ticket unless they're like 15 miles over the limit instead of 8.
Combination of white guilt and the new stuff, which is you'll get crucified if you do anything.
Yeah. Cops are not being as aggressive and all this stuff. There's a general phenomenon where blacks are being allowed to misbehave more than whites. And these players taking a knee during the national anthem is an example of it. And however, the problem with the NFL, the owners all trying to suck up to the 77% of their players who are black and to pander to them and to allow them to get away with more for fear of being accused of being racist. But they want to bridge too far. When you start pissing off the 88% of the players who are not black, and probably a lot of the black players. I just posted a YouTube of a former Arizona State football player who he didn't go to the NFL. He became a cop, and he at length, I think it's 23 minutes long or something. He rips the NFL black players who are doing this up one side and down the other. And it's saying similar things to what you and I are saying, but also talking about how much money they make. He doesn't make that kind of money. He said, "You want to do something about this? Do like I did. Become a cop." It's taking a knee in a football game when you're making $2 million a year. What that doesn't prove anything. Quit and come. Like Pat Tillman quit to go to the Army. Quit being an NFL player making $2 million a year. Come down here, go through the police academy, and you go out on the streets with me, and you can refrain from shooting black guys and all that. But he one of the comments about his YouTube said he totaled the NFL. But this is a black guy going on and on, very angry and very enthusiastically about knock this crap off. You want to help the problem you claim you're interested in. Taking a knee. I was in the Army and I went to Vietnam, and I see people, they put a little magnet on their car. It says, "We support our troops." And I told one of them once, I said, "You know what support is for troops in combat? It's when we pick up the radio and we call for artillery or we call for attack air, and all of a sudden explosions start happening where the enemy is. That's support. You're putting a magnet on your car 10,000 miles away from the battlefield. That's not support." Well, and by the same token, taking a knee in a football game when you're making $2 million a year, you may say that supports Michael Brown, but
you got to write this down.
You may say that supports Michael Brown, but Michael Brown's pretty dead. Now, maybe if you were a cop and you were the partner of that white guy, and you were a black guy, maybe you could have talked the guy down or something so it wouldn't happen. But taking a knee in a football game is like putting a magnet on your car 10,000 miles from the scene of the thing you're supposedly supporting. It means nothing.
Yeah, nowadays there's a comedian, Anthony Jeselnik, who says, people post about thoughts and prayers for the people. Yeah. And he says, you know what thoughts and prayers are worth? Nothing.
Right.
And now, there
was actually a study.
People put their Facebook profile. They'll put like an overlay of a flag of whatever country got attacked. After Charlie
Paris,
Hebdo, the France flag.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed how people only do it for certain things.
Yeah.
And it's very selective and weird how they choose.
Politically correct is what it is. There was actually a study done, a medical scientific study, to see if prayers help people. And they had a control group, and they had a group that was going to be prayed for. And they had several churches, and they were praying their asses off for the group B, and telling the other people to go to hell or whatever the opposite of prayer is. And they did this for an extended period of time. And guess what?
Yeah,
they found no difference in the medical progress of the either group.
Yeah. I think that's one of the. You said, how can you help these groups? It's not, taking a knee during the anthem. It's not. They're not claiming help. That's why they use this weird word, awareness.
Get better.
It's
police.
like, as long as I talk about it, I'm helping.
Yeah. Well, that's the good intentions thing. I have a couple web articles where I said for liberals, good intentions are 100% substitute for results. They'll do Lyndon Johnson started a poverty program, the War on Poverty, in the 60s. They keep saying Afghanistan is our longest war. No. The war on poverty is our longest war. We're talking 55 years or something. And if you go to the liberals and say, well, we need to end the war on poverty because it didn't work. Oh, no. We have good intentions. We've had 60 years of good intentions. Plus, a whole lot of us make $75,000 a year working on the war on poverty, and we want to keep making $75,000 a year. But they claim, and you see this in the military too. Didn't used to, but the military now well, what's the matter with you guys? Why are you still in Afghanistan after all these years? Why haven't you won? They said, well, we built a school and we, these little anecdotes. And we blew up these 50 guys up in the mountains with a drone, yada yada yada, or a mother of all bombs. They give you these little anecdotes of an occasional success, but not net success, not overall success. And they're like liberals now. They work for the government like the liberals. We have good intentions. We want to win the war, and we're trying, and we're dying, and we're getting wounded. So shut up. You can't complain about lack of results. We did our effort, we die, we get wounded, we're away from our families. End of discussion. Doesn't matter whether we win or not. Well, yes, it does.
Yeah, and I think people, you and I are more familiar with the statistics of police interactions with white people and black people and males and females and stuff. But even without the statistics, people watching the NFL and watching this whole stuff, they know sort of instinctively it's all being exaggerated.
Right.
And the if you want to look at the statistics, which I've been sort of taken for granted here because I've looked at it so much, but I'll share the basics. If you're talking about raw numbers, more white people get shot by cops than black people. Now, there are more white people than black. So if you account for population, then it switches. Now there's more black people per capita being shot.
By whom?
By cops.
But what about the
I'll get to that.
blacks who aren't cops?
But then you got to say, well, what about crime rates? Well, if you factor in violent crime rates, it switches back. White people are shot far more per capita and adjusted for violent crime. And that's when you adjust for violent crime, not from government statistics, which many of these activists will say, well, it was collected by the government. Maybe it's fake.
No,
They've done studies.
I would say that some of those statistics are designed to make the blacks look like victims.
Yeah, but the notion that a government run for 8 years by a black president and black attorney general is faking the numbers in favor of
black victims.
Yeah, it's just not. It doesn't hold up. So. But I'm saying that they've even done studies where it had nothing to do with government collection. They called and they were looking for trouble and they still didn't find it. They asked people, "Have you been the victim of a violent?" And it was like black people commit violent crimes at 3 times the rate of whites.
Right, and I think 9/11 calls a large percentage, much higher than the percentage of blacks in the population. To the extent that they report the race of a suspect, it's black. And then when a 9/11 call comes in, they're not saying, hello, go to the $1 million white house neighborhood. They're saying go to the black neighborhood.
Yeah,
so the 9/11 calls are coming from black neighborhoods, asking you to come to the black neighborhood, and to the extent that they saw the suspect, they predominantly identify the suspect as black. What these blacks that are complaining, you get some guys like a judge or
and whites.
Well,
a lot of my college classmates, they're full on white guilt.
No, forget that for a minute. I'm talking about a guy like Thomas Sowell or Walter E. Williams.
Oh, okay.
These are economics professors. There was recently an NFL football player down in Texas or somewhere got arrested, and they made him spread eagle in a car and all this. They've been pulled over. Guys like Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell, who are Stanford economists and George Mason economists. These are highly respected people, but they're black. They get pulled over. I don't know if Sowell ever did, but Williams, I heard him say he did once. They get pulled over and they're kind of humiliated and treated like criminals. The people that they need to complain to, and I think Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell would agree with this, the people they need to complain to is their fellow blacks who commit so many crimes that it makes you see a black guy goes by a street light so you can see he's black and he's in a white neighborhood and maybe his car's missing a tail light, and they have so many criminal complaints from that particular that pattern of facts that they think, well, my job is to go find out what this guy's doing. Why is he here? My uncle was pulled over once because he was leaving the apartment where he lived at like 2 a.m. Well, he had to get to work early, and that's why he was doing it. But they pulled him over. Yeah. Called for backup. So if you're
a friend of mine who's Filipino was driving through Black Hawk, and he told me the story. He got jerked around by the cops.
Yeah.
I would point out he was driving a non-Black Hawk car as well as being in my neighborhood. He had like a big spoiler, like 2 feet above.
Yeah,
He probably had his music blasting and
Well,
stuff. He
Black
didn't look
Hawk-
like a Black Hawk
We
resident.
need to explain to the listeners.
Oh,
Black
excuse
Hawk is where John Madden lives. Black Hawk is a very ritzy place. Now, I live in a less famous ritzy neighborhood, and my neighborhood is all cul-de-sacs. So you can't drive through my neighborhood. The entire it's 2 homeowners associations, and all of them. It's one big huge cul-de-sac, maybe 500, 600 homes. So if you see somebody walking in the neighborhood or driving in the neighborhood, you recognize you've seen that guy every day, or you've seen that car every day. If you see somebody walking that you haven't seen before, or you see a car that doesn't look like it belongs, and I mean, I know the cars. I
When they look frightened when you notice them and stuff.
Well, they look out of place, and they look. I've joked that if you are a poor person and you come to my neighborhood and walk on the sidewalk, you probably get 2 calls to the sheriff's office for every 100 yards you walk,
regardless of your skin color.
Well, the skin color might be a factor, but if you don't look like you belong, and these are million.
If a white meth head is walking down the street in your neighborhood,
they're going to get called.
Yeah.
These houses are like $1.5 million, $2 million houses. So if you're driving some crappy car, or you're walking and you don't look like, I know who walks. The people walking their dogs. You got people wearing their jogging outfits who are jogging or walking for exercise. And there's no stores or anything. So there's no reason to walk except to walk your dog or to get a little exercise. So you see somebody that doesn't look like he's walking the dog or getting exercise or driving, and they call the police. And I mean this literally. So you cannot walk in my neighborhood or drive in my neighborhood if you don't live there. If you and you're not equally affluent, you can't go 100 yards without somebody calling the sheriff's department. Literally, we had a truck deliver stuff, a moving truck deliver stuff to our house years ago, and there used to be a guard at the gate. We don't have a guard anymore, but there's still the guard house. Anyway, the guy pulls up to the. It's like 2 a.m. He pulls up to the guard house and he said, "We're delivering stuff to Mr. Reed, and we don't want to ring the doorbell until like 8 a.m., but we're going to park on the street in front of the house and sleep in our truck." And the guy nodded. And they pulled it away, and he called the cops. And they went, knocked on the window. "Who are you? Let's see your driver's license," and all this.
Was he telling the truth?
He was.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
I had guys come to my door once. It was trash day, and it was the afternoon. So most people put their trash cans away. And these are a couple of Latinos. They come to my door and knock on the door. And I answered the door, and they asked me if I was Mr. Smith. And I said, "No, I'm not. Mr. Smith is the developer who built this development. There's his house way up on top of that hill." And they said, "Oh,
it's also a very generic name."
Yes, it was, exactly. I don't think they knew there was any Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
But my trash cans were still out. Other people had put them away. So it looked like my home was empty, that I was at work in the city or something. So
they were checking.
So I point up the street to the west. Okay, see the house on top of the hill? That is Mr. Smith's house. This development was built by the Harold Smith Company, and Smith is right up there in that house. So I'm pointing west. So they go back and get in their crappy car, and they go east. Now remember, this is all cul-de-sacs, so they're not leaving. They're going to look for Mr. Smith not where I told them. So I got in my car. I called the cops immediately. I got in my car, and I went looking for them. And they were parked on the driveway of a house up on Carlton, which is a cul-de-sac a little bit deeper toward the mountain than our house. And so if they're looking for Mr. Smith, and I said he's up on top of that mountain, why are they going, to the west? Why are they going east? Why are they parking in the driveway? And I called that homeowner, and he wasn't there. So these guys are obviously burglars, and now somebody's going to say, "Well, you're anti-Latino." Bull. They want to know Mr. Smith. They're knocking on my door in the middle of the day. I told them where Mr. Smith was. They showed no interest in where Mr. Smith was. My trash cans are still out, making it look like nobody's home. Bunch of bull. So there's a whole hell of a lot of ways to get stopped when you're innocent. I think I got stopped 3 times in my life. Once I was speeding. Gave me a speeding ticket. Once Mike, your brother, was in the back seat. I was taking him to swimming, but he was so small. He was like 2 or 3 years old. He's so small you couldn't see him. And I was in the carpool lane.
Yeah.
And I got pulled over, and then a cop saw that he was there, and he sent me on my way. And I'm trying to think what the other one was. Anyway, my brother-in-law died, and I was driving his car. We were at his house in Boston to get clean out the estate stuff, all the clothing and everything. I'm driving his car on an errand, and a motorcycle cop stops me, and he says, "Your license plate ends in an 8, and that was last month or 2 months ago, and you don't have the color sticker for the current year. So when your license plate ends in the number 8, that means you have to get a new sticker in August, and you didn't. This was October." And I said, "Well, it's my brother-in-law's car. He died. I don't know anything about that." So he calls it in, and my brother-in-law apparently had called the DMV and got them to extend his registration for 4 months. He didn't want to pay for a whole year because he knew he was going to die. He had prostate cancer. So anyway, I got stopped. They pulled me over, treated me like I'm breaking the law. They found that I wasn't. They sent me on my way. So, I'm not going to get too excited about this being stop stuff. If you tell me all the circumstances, tell me what the time of day was, what were you driving, what neighborhood were you in, and then let's go look at, interview the cops. Say, why'd you stop this guy? And so because we get 27 complaints last week about people in cars like this with his skin color driving down these streets at that time of day, and we're supposed to respond to these complaints.
Right.
So he fits the pattern of what the black people who call us on the phone are complaining about.
And every single high profile case where they see racism against blacks, all of them have at least one mitigating circumstance to go, well, it's not what you said it was.
You see the cops
every single one, like all of them. Even there was one where the guy they were wrestling and then he ran away and the guy shot him while he was running away. It looks terrible. But even in that case, they were wrestling over a taser at one point. It's not like the guy was walking along and the cops just started shooting, which is what people will tell you is what happened. But I mean, whether it's Mike Brown attacking the cop, Trayvon attacking.
I believe that at times in some parts of the country, cops have behaved.
Oh, of course,
abominably.
I don't think. Well, in the past, 100%.
Yeah, probably still
nowadays. I would just say it's probably way. I mean, it's got to be less. You can't track it. It's just you're getting the opinion of people.
Well, you got a lot of the uniform cams, or what they call them, body cams now.
Well, and a lot of
car cams.
People are being proven wrong with some of those. They claim they were harassed, and the whole video they're harassing the cop. And the cop's being polite.
You just had this cop, one of my fellow West Point graduates, amazingly, who said, when I get that guy, I'm going to kill him. Recorded by his body cam. Yeah. And then he did. And he got off.
Well, he didn't get out of the car and start shooting. There was a scuffle, too. But yes, the wording, that was about as bad as it gets as far as him admitting.
He got off.
Yeah.
Now, it was a bench trial, meaning there was no jury, just a judge. The judge wrote a lengthy opinion, which is abnormal. Trial court judges don't normally write opinions at all. That's only done by appellate courts. But he wrote a lengthy opinion. But again, it was a 2-3 week trial. He heard the evidence. I didn't hear the evidence. You're talking about a standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. The issue is whether or not he was in fear for his life. I think maybe the judge thinks the guy was guilty, but he had to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And better to let 9 guys who committed a crime go free than to convict one innocent man and all that stuff. So I don't know.
And that just enrages people.
I don't.
They want a scalp.
Well, they want a neat little narrative.
Yeah.
But
they want scalps. Victim. It's a lynch mob. Each circumstance, it's just like, oh, this is our chance to get one of the cops.
Well, they
haven't even listened to the facts. They don't know whether the black person that was shot actually started it, ended it, all that stuff.
Well, they want to be.
They're uninterested.
They love their victimhood, and they want to find evidence that they're victims. And
it's so hard to find that they jump on these high-profile cases that often fall apart.
You were recruited out of college by the FBI. And ultimately, you didn't do it. But I could have been a cop if I wanted to be. But does it look like an attractive job to you? You and your white skin going to go be a cop somewhere?
Hell no.
Yeah. Well, so what is this like the players angering the fans with the anthem? If you constantly saying white cops are evil, and every time a white cop shoots a black guy, you burn down the town you're in, and the white guy in question has to quit the force and move to another state and all that. This is not a way to attract good guys to policing. And the black cops don't get treated much better.
Yeah, ultimately the communities that are going to be the most affected are the ones that get the most cop calls. They're going to have less cops showing up.
Well, they have less cops showing up, and they're going to have fewer
proportionately black neighborhoods.
Yes, and they're going to have fewer people apply to be cops, which means they have to have lower standards for whom they hire. So it's
brutality might go up as a result. Because
well, it does. There have been times when I read that they were having so much trouble finding cops for this inner city or that inner city that they had to start taking convicted felons or guys who were convicted of crimes. So the big picture, if you constantly bad-mouthing white cops and burning the town down every time a white cop shoots somebody, including when it's appropriate, you're going to get fewer white people and probably fewer black people applying for the job. Yeah. Because it's your life could be ruined by doing something that you didn't do anything wrong, but because some people who heard little snippets of what happened and heard lies about what happened, they go nuts. They hate your guts. You can't even live in the same state anymore. Who wants to risk that?
Yeah. No, even black cops, they might be even more attacked if
well, they're not getting much better treatment.
Freddie Gray, I think half the cops involved there were black.
That was and they were all indicted. They all got off. The black judge let them said they're not guilty. And that whole story, there was a black guy. It was a 2-person paddy wagon with a separator, and the black guy on the other side said the black guy, Freddie Gray, who died, was banging his head against the wall, like he was trying to get some injury that he could sue over and claim the cops did it.
Managed to kill himself.
Yeah, he killed himself, and then he caught hell from the black community for saying that, and then I didn't mean that. But the solution to this crop, let's assume for a moment that the black people are victims of bad cops. The solution to that is to get good cops. Now, how do you get good cops? It's not by making the job of cop. You bet your life and your career on that you're not going to get some situation that a bunch of black activists are going to mislead people about. And it doesn't look, I think most cops, when they see these things happening to Wilson and Ferguson and so forth, they're thinking there, but for the grace of God, go I. I think probably some of them retiring a little early. If the problem is what they say it is, the solution is better cops. The way you get better cops is to make the job of being a cop more attractive. And that means the respect you get, the way you're treated, your salary, your pension. But this war against white cops, and to a lesser extent against all cops, by black activists like Sharpton and all, that has the opposite effect of improving the quality of the applicant pool for police jobs.
Yeah, and the constant seething rage about it. People talking about, I could walk down the street and get shot any day, when the statistics show that is absurd.
Right. Well, it's not absurd in Oakland. Not absurd.
But meaning by a cop. They're saying, any unarmed person could just walk down the street and get shot by a cop. There is no statistical data basis for this.
I have written a little bit about, and I've heard some black fathers say that they have taught their sons, when you have an interaction with a cop, you keep your hands away from your pockets. You don't wear a hoodie.
I'm saying that the actual data on how often that happens is so microscopic.
I think some blacks do get killed, not because the white cop was racist, but because the white cop suspected they were criminals, and they ran, or they put their hands in their pocket for some reason, or
that's what I was getting to, or the seething rage that they constantly have about this topic. When they interact with a cop, they're not going to be very polite.
Oh yeah, they're trash
and
talking.
Now they're trash talking the cop, and the cop's getting more nervous.
Yeah.
And this is just
when a cop tells you to lay on the ground and you're wearing nice clothes and the ground's wet and dirty. If I had was a black guy with a teenage son, I'd say you will not wear a hoodie. I don't care. I'll get you clothes.
The whole hoodie
take
thing
care
is
of that.
so ridiculous.
But you will not go out at night without damn good reason. And if it's in a neighborhood that's bad, if the cop tells you to stand on your head, you will stand on your head and say, yes, sir. You will do exactly what the cop says. You will keep your hands in sight at all times. You will make no sudden movements. And I will tell him it is.
I'm going to tell my kids
I shouldn't have to tell you this, but I do. And the time to deal with it is not when you're facing a cop, especially if he's got his gun drawn. You make slow movements. You do what he says. You answer his questions. You call him sir. It is not the time. There is a thing nowadays. It seems like blacks feel that they have a right in the Constitution to resist arrest. There's this guy in New York City, who died.
Eric Garner
selling cigarettes.
Illegally selling cigarettes in front of somebody's store. They called the cops. The cop came to arrest him, and he said, "No, you're not arresting me. Stop jerking me around."
Yeah. So that was a bad idea. And Eric Garner, now he died of a heart attack. He probably had some. Looked like he was obese and all.
He was very obese. He already had a heart condition, but he was breaking the law. And they said, "You're under."
Half the cops were black.
Arresting. Well, the cop in question was, I believe, he might have been Italian. I don't remember, but they didn't shoot him.
Yeah, the black cops.
They put him on the ground like they do with everybody that resists arrest.
Right, he didn't want to go to the ground.
And he was.
So now he's under the ground.
People are saying, "Oh, he was yelling, I can't breathe, I can't breathe."
Well, I think that's a calm.
Which you can't do if you can't say to anything if you can't breathe. It turned out it killed him.
And I would bet that saying I can't breathe is a standard practice of, especially since that happened. But claiming injury is a standard way to get to trick the cops into not doing what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, how many times has a suspect on the ground said something?
Well, false complaint
that was completely false.
Yeah, you're in the process of killing me.
One time out of 1,000, the guy actually dies, and we're supposed to attribute this to police brutality.
And maybe 20 times out of 1,000, he gets up and runs. I think it's a tough job being a cop, especially when you have to. When you have to subdue somebody. If you tase them, a lot of times the taser doesn't work if you're wearing heavy clothes because it's got to drive like a harpoon into your skin. And a lot of times you tase somebody, he dies from being tased.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a cop in Vallejo, which is a not so great neighborhood in the...
It went bankrupt.
Bay Area.
A couple of years ago.
San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah.
He had to move. Basically, he was on patrol. Got a call or something. It was 3 a.m. and he was on some cul-de-sac, and there were two guys sitting in a car. Turned out the guy was sitting in front of his own house. They were smoking or something, and he went in. He went to talk to them, and they freaked out and started doing something. He shot one of them dead.
Whoa!
I mean, there was no trial. It was justified, but there were black groups in the area that basically threatened his life, threatened his kids, posted pictures, posted his address. He had to move. And it's all about this white cop.
Who replaced him?
He's still a cop there.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he's still a cop in the same department, but he had to move. He was worried about people showing up to the...
You going to retire a little earlier than he might?
I don't know.
If he was working in black cars?
But he, everybody freaked out. Oh, white cop shooting a black guy. They leave out the part where the passenger is alive and well, didn't even get dinged. What happened was the guy, made a movement in the dark at 3 a.m. with a cop trying to talk to him.
By himself.
Bad idea.
Hey, I don't know why he didn't call for backup.
He might have had a partner there, but this is what happens. This is how people get shot. They make a move, they wrestle, they resist. I was some guy walking down the street that gets shot.
I was in the Army for 8 years, 4 years at West Point and 4 years as an officer. I did a tour in Vietnam. People who have guns, loaded guns, are dangerous. Stonewall Jackson, the Civil War, probably the best Union or Confederate general, one of my fellow West Point grads. He got shot dead by his own men. And he was walking around out on the perimeter at night. There's a guy named Mickey Marcus, was another West Pointer. He was helped the Israelis when they were trying to win the War of Independence in the late 40s. He decided to take a stroll near the perimeter at night, and somebody accosted him, a guard, in Hebrew. And the guy didn't speak Hebrew. He was Jewish. He didn't speak Hebrew. Boom, he's dead. So a whole lot of people die in wars, in and around wars, who shouldn't have. They get shot by their own guys.
Friendly fire is...
Well, it's an accident, or they do something.
Pat Tillman.
Yeah, Pat Tillman was just...
Stuck his head up or something, right?
Well, no, what happened was they thought they were under fire. And I read several books about it, and I talked to people who were very close to that group. The people in this, there was a little truck convoy. The people in the truck convoy, the American soldiers, they're Rangers, of which I am also one, they got a little spread out, and they're shooting, blasting away. Now, there's to this day, it may be there was never anybody there from the enemy, or that they left early on. Anyway, they're blasting away at the rocks and the hills around them, and they get a little separated. And the platoon leader, who had been the first captain at West Point, the top cadet, guy who led the parades, he got wounded. So then he's dealing with his wounds, and everybody's blasting away. And Tillman is getting shot at by his own guys. So he's behind a rock with an Afghan soldier and an American. And he's popping smoke grenades out to try to show, look, I'm an American. The enemy doesn't have smoke grenades. He's throwing smoke grenades out. He's yelling at the other guy, I think had a radio. He's yelling on the radio, hey, you're shooting at us, God damn it, stop it. And so finally the shooting stops. And Tillman figured, well, it's about time. And he stood up, 3 bullets in the forehead from a what they call a saw. It's a handheld machine gun.
Whether it's
shot by his own guy
in the military or cops and civilians back here, you're saying anybody with a gun needs to be treated a certain way.
You got to be careful.
You need to act correctly.
If there's a firefight going on, you want to stay with the group. Because if you start moving out,
that's the
like
military
you're going to be, it's anybody.
Your ultimate point was the cop is sitting there with a gun on his hip.
No, he said
you should not be.
Yeah, well, he may have it in his hand, but you don't. And at night, there's all kinds of opportunities for confusion. In combat, you have all the sound of the gunfire, and you have the smoke of the gunfire, and you have the dust of people running around and explosions and all. It's very confusing, and it's very hard to tell exactly who's a good guy. So and usually in these situations, and I think it's probably true with cops, the good guys are in one location, and the bad guys are potentially in all the other locations. So you don't want to be in a location where you seem like you're a bad guy, and if it's dark or noisy or whatever, when people are carrying loaded guns, whether they're military or they're police or they're NRA members, you have to be careful. You can't. You have to give the benefit of the doubt to the other guy. A lot of people indulge themselves in road rage after a little car accident or somebody cuts them off or something. Well, if the guy that you decide you're going to go road rage on is carrying a concealed weapon, with or without a permit, you're liable to die. It's not. It's just move on, man.
Like you said, they feel like it's a constitutional right to jerk around somebody with a gun
because they're in the right.
Okay, go for it. But that's a terrible idea.
Yeah,